What's going on, YouTube? Just giving this live thing a little test here. I don't think I've ever done a live stream from YouTube. And I got something like north of 10,000 subscribers, so I'm guessing that some of them are going to get a notification. And we got this thing going here. All right, got the first person popping in. So got a couple now. So it's my first stream I've ever done on YouTube, and I thought I'd give it a go. I'm also doing what looks to be my last trip of the year. I'm heading out to where am I going? Can't even remember right now. Somewhere out in Missouri. It's for a corporate group. Um, but yeah, I'm at John Wayne Airport right now, and I don't know if chat or not. I think that the chat is enabled. Like I said, it's my first time using this, and so yeah, at John Wayne Airport, busting out what should be my last trip of the year for a corporate event. This is a pretty cool one though, because this corporate event, unlike others, get to be very open about sharing the gospel. Were you in the Goon Squad? P.S. Okay, so the Goon Squad is a reference to SEAL training. And so the Goon Squad is basically the guys that are in the very back on all the runs and on the swims. They call that the Goon Squad. And no, I was not in the Goon Squad. Um, Thankfully, I was trained pretty well by Scott Helvenston, and he got me up there in the top three on all the runs. And I definitely was a top three swimmer for sure. So never spent any time in the back in the Goon Squad, but that doesn't mean you're not going to make it through training, because a guy comes to mind by the name of Alex Gagne, who definitely was in the Goon Squad in my class, Buds Class 254, and he's one of the guys that made it ultimately. He became a SEAL. And guess what? One of the guys that was always in the very front of the class, this guy named Barth, he was a top three guy. Everyone pinned him as the one to make it for sure. In fact, he was the fastest guy. He was the strongest guy. And he didn't make it, in Hell Week. He's one of the first quitters. And so I think that demonstrates the principle of the SEAL Creed, where it says common man, uncommon desire to succeed. It's not the uncommon man. It's not the extraordinary man. It's just the common man with uncommon desire to succeed. So you got to underline, bold print that word desire. It's all about the heart. It's all about the mindset. It's all about just that mental toughness. And that's true biblically speaking as well. David was a man after God's own heart, and he had the right kind of heart, but he wasn't exactly a specimen to speak of when you looked at him physically, right? I mean, he was nothing compared to his predecessor, Saul, right? That was the people's choice. That was the man's man right there. He was the stud of the class, I guess you could say. And David was the runt of the litter. David was literally the last man picked on the kickball team. In fact, they weren't even considering him when they're going through all the sons. I still preach the gospel in the streets. It's been a while since I've done that in the streets. I'm certainly not done with it, though. Seems like every time I pay Ray Comfort a visit back in Bellflower, that him and I wind up doing that. And so I definitely need to get back out there more. I have not been recording, though. I haven't been bringing a camera along in a very long time, YouTube. You guys know it. I basically, since I stopped uploading, I stopped bringing a camera along with me. But I should start recording. I did notice that when I stopped bringing a camera, that I was able to get a little bit more of like a personal conversation with people. Like they're more transparent, and that's just how people are. If you don't have a camera pointed in your face, you feel a little bit more relaxed. The guard is down, and you can get into some of these deeper philosophical and spiritual questions and not worry that, like who's going to see this, or what I say is basically it's recorded for, all of history. Once it's out there, it's out there. And so people get uncomfortable when you put a camera in front of their face. I, certainly remember when we were doing those programs at Living Waters called On the Box. They just have a camera and just know like this is recorded forever, or even before that, when I was doing some of the very first uploads on YouTube. I was very concerned to ever, make a mistake, because it's out there forever. And it's one of those things where people can just, pull it back up. But, it's really not that big of a deal. If you make a mistake at any point, you know what you do? You go back, you point it out, and you just say, hey, here's the mistake I made. None of us are perfect. No one should pretend to be perfect. Yeah, so back on YouTube here, doing the first YouTube live upload. And right now I'm at John Wayne Airport, heading out to, where am I going? It's in Missouri. I can't remember where I'm going though right now. Oh, I just lost that comment that went by. Let me see if I can scroll through or see a history on these comments. Like I said, this is the first time. Um, Here we go. No? Top comments, live chat. I don't want to hide anything. Sorry, guys. I'm just figuring this out. Okay, cool. Now I can see the comment history. I'm scrolling through. Um, make full proof. Make full proof of thy ministry. Okay. I don't know what that means exactly. I can figure it out if I sit here and pontificate. I got a question regarding the Sabbath. Is it Sunday or Saturday? So, I think traditionally the Sabbath has been on a Saturday. The interesting thing about the Sabbath is out of all the commandments, out of all those commandments, the one that you do not see reinstituted in the New Testament, you never see the early church practicing the Sabbath anymore. I believe that's because Jesus is our rest. That doesn't mean that we should never take a rest day, but from that point forward, they were worshiping on Sunday, which became the Lord's Day. And that's it, man. That's recorded in the early church. That's early church history. You don't see them adhering to a Saturday Sabbath from that point forward. And then there's other passages where it says, like, let no man judge you in Sabbath. There's another passage in Romans where it talks about how, one man esteems another day, above another one esteems every day alike. Let each be fully convinced in his own mind. I know that's in Romans. I put that to memory at some point, but I don't remember the exact address of it. Someone could pull that up and throw the reference out there. Let each be fully convinced in his own mind. All you got to do is Google that right there. It'll give you, and put Romans. It'll give you the passage. So hopefully that helped you out a little bit on the question of Sabbath. Yeah, we don't practice the Sabbath the same way that the early Jews, the Pharisees, the Sadducees, the Sanhedrin, just the early people of God. We don't see that practice that way anymore. In the scriptures or in early church history, you might be able to find a small sect, little group somewhere, but Jesus is our rest. All right, what are the questions we got popping up here? And hopefully that satisfies your question about the Sabbath. Okay. The camera helps for encouragement. Absolutely. Yep. So that's one of the benefits. There's pros and cons to using a camera when you're doing street evangelism. Like I mentioned, some of the cons is putting a camera in people's faces keeps them from being, I think, completely transparent. It keeps them from being themselves. All of a sudden, an exterior kind of goes on because they're being looked at by a lot of people. But on the flip side of that, the encouragement aspect of it is that when you record something and then you upload it on YouTube, it gives a lot of people an opportunity to see how it's done and to learn successes and to learn from your mistakes as well. And the other side of that is you in terms of law enforcement. If you're ever wrongfully accused of doing something that you didn't do, man, it is great to have a recorded history of that. Don't forsake the calling. Absolutely. Where have I been? Well, not on YouTube. All over the nation. I've been doing a lot of speaking. I haven't counted up how many events I've done this year, but just in November alone, I was on 10 different trips. So 10 different trips, most of those being like faith-based outreaches, Sunday services, men's events, and then a lot of corporate events as well. And so on the corporate side of things, I'm mostly being brought in to sort of be a subject matter expert in terms of talking about, things that pertain to like the SEAL philosophy and mindset. And, that's what they're looking for. So I can't get into the explicit gospel when I go to these corporate events. However, there's ways for me to bring Christ into it. I always use Jesus as an example of a servant leader. And I always use Jesus as an example of the ultimate motivation for me. Because part of our SEAL creed, and this just crosses over to the secular world, says in the worst of conditions, we rely upon the legacy of those who have gone before us to steady our resolve and guide our every deed. So in other words, before we go out on an operation, there's a good chance that, Master Chief or an assault leader might get up and he'll just retell the stories, right? It's a memorial to these guys like, Mike Mansour, who sacrificed his life. He jumped on a hand grenade to save the lives of others. And so these are the stories that we retell in the SEAL teams. Those stories will never fade away. They will never die. And it's in the worst of conditions I rely upon the legacy of those who have gone before me. It's these stories to steady my resolve, to guide my every deed. So that's something I think that crosses over to the corporate world as well, not just in the SEAL teams, because I think that every American, you know, whether you're out there in the Middle East in the desert or sitting there at a desk, you could be appreciative and you could be fueled up. You can, really strengthen your resolve and desire by focusing on the legacy of those who've gone before you. I just saw this comment. Do I know Jocko Willink? I don't know Jocko on a personal level, but when I was on SEAL Team 1 and on SEAL Team 7, he was in charge of all West Coast training at TRADET, which is the training department, for SEALs. And so definitely, you know, sat there underneath his leadership and teaching and instruction many times. But I don't know him on a personal level, but he's the real deal. All of us always looked at Jocko. He's a SEAL. He's an uncommon man amongst uncommon men. Just checking some of these comments here. I think I'm all caught up. Yeah, so super stoked to be back. Okay, what about David Goggins, Rob O'Neill? I don't know Rob O'Neill at all, but I was under the leadership and training of David Goggins for a while as well. When I was on SEAL Team 1 and SEAL Team 7, David Goggins was an instructor at TRADET, and he was the heavy weapon instructor. Obviously implies that I was a heavy weapons guy, which is ironic because I wasn't a very big guy at the time. I eventually grew into it. When I was going through SEAL training, I was no heavier than 145 pounds. I got down to 130s in Hell Week. And you're carrying around a machine gun with all the equipment. I remember stepping on the scale with all of my stuff on, all the water that I'd be carrying, the armor, um, the machine gun itself, all the ammunition that you'd be bringing along, the extra barrel for your weapon. And I weighed in, I think it was 110 or 115 extra pounds when I stepped on that scale. But eventually I grew into that. I think by the time I was in Iraq, I was like 195 pounds. But yeah, David Goggins was the heavy weapons instructor during that time. And he ran a tough course, the toughest. Like, definitely some of that, this is like post SEAL train. Like, this is why you're in a team. Like, some of that was tougher than what we did in BUD/S. And that guy is the real deal. I remember, we got this heavy equipment, and we're up there in a place called Nyland. It's a desert of nothing. It's very southeast, close to the border. And, we've got these knee pads that we wear because we're diving down onto the desert floor, wearing all this heavy stuff. And I just remember one instance where David Goggins wasn't exactly too happy with how things were going, and he's letting us all know. And he was, trying to fire us up and motivate us. And so, as an example, he grabbed a weapon and he just started laying down some rounds downrange, and he was diving down on the desert floor the way that we're supposed to be diving down and getting back up, and we're all staring down at his shins because, like, I mean, there were streams of blood coming down his legs, and he wasn't even acknowledging it. And this is because he's diving down onto this desert floor. It's got these sharp rocks, right? He's got this extra weight that he's wearing, and he doesn't have the knee pads on. I mean, blood is just pouring down his legs. I can't believe we're all just staring because he's just in these shorts. And so he's trying to like give us some instructions, like, you got to tell the M4 gunner to get out of the way. You're the machine gun, laying down these rounds, and just blood pouring. We're like, dude, your legs. And he just like looks down and just, that was it. That was about as much as he acknowledged of it. And so that guy, I don't even know what to say. He's a beast. He's a beast. When you got a bunch of Navy SEALs, that are looking at you like, dude, man, look at you. Like, he's next level for sure. Did the SEAL lifestyle ever conflict with my faith other than the conflicts that I had with some of the teammates? So I'm just walking over here while I'm going to answer this because I got to make sure that I'm not going to miss my flight because it's already boarding. All right. I think it's just group 2. So did it ever conflict? No. Professionally speaking, no, not at all. There's no conflict. I think that the assumed conflict would be that the Bible says, isn't the 6th commandment, thou shalt not kill? Well, no, that's not the commandment. The commandment is thou shalt not murder. And there's a big difference between murdering and killing somebody, right? Murdering is, shedding innocent blood. So even in Ecclesiastes, it says there is a time to kill. There's a time for everything, man. And in Romans chapter 13, it talks about how the government does not bear the sword in vain. that we're to be a terror in the lives of those that commit terror. And if you don't want to be afraid of the government, don't do wrong. And so that's exactly what we're doing in the SEAL teams. And I totally feel that, once I became a Christian and I was in the SEAL teams, the way I looked at it was I'm a SEAL for Christ. Hope the sound's okay, by the way. This is the first time I've ever done this live stream. I'm doing it based off of the Wi-Fi at John Wayne Airport, which is not the greatest Wi-Fi, not only for reasons of speed, but I was just recently looking at an article that Drudge Report had linked, and they said out of all the most vulnerable Wi-Fis in the nation, John Wayne Airport, where I'm at right now, was ranked top 2. I think it was number 1. It was John Wayne and San Diego. So I don't know about that. You should start a podcast. That would be cool. And I've been in talks about that with my buddy Damon Friedman. He was saying that, at the beginning of the new year, we're talking about this a couple months ago, that maybe we should get a podcast going. That would be rad. I'd really enjoy doing something like that. Hey, I'll tell you guys something that's been kind of gnawing at me a little bit that I saw in the news is, I don't know if you guys remember this guy, John Allen. I don't know how to pronounce his last name, but he was that missionary that went out to the North Sentinel Island. And he went out there with the purpose of sharing the gospel with these people. He went right to them. And I've seen nothing but negative comments. And maybe it's because I'm not tuned in just to Christian circles, but it's everywhere that I've looked in terms of just pop culture, it's all negative stuff. How dare he go over there and try and impose his faith on these people? Or they say, oh, he could have brought disease to them. He doesn't care about their lives. Or, these people, they didn't want anyone coming to their island. Obviously, they've, made that crystal clear by shooting arrows at him. And so they just make him out to be, in their opinion, a fool. And I don't think that's the case whatsoever. I think that he was fulfilling the Great Commission right there. And I understand that they don't see things from our worldview, but I've even seen Christians say some of the same stuff. If these people don't want you there, you shouldn't have gone there. It's that's not the Christian point of view on that at all. It's not. Imagine the early church. Look at 11 out of the 12 apostles. Basically 12 out of 12, if I'm going to count instead of Judas, I'm going to count, Paul in that factor. They went to places where they didn't want them preaching the name of Jesus. In Acts chapter 5, Peter made the point. He says, because they were told, we don't want you to speak this name, Jesus. Don't do it anymore. And they're like, well, ought we obey men or God? You decide. In other words, they're going to let God be the judge on that. And if they got a problem with it, they got a problem with it. And if they want to attack them over it, so be it. They will be attacked. But they're going to share the gospel. These guys were killed for sharing the gospel, just like this guy, John Allen. So how's it any different? They go, there's laws. There's laws. He shouldn't have been over there. He was violating the law. Well, there's certain times where I think that we should be violators of the law. It's any time it goes contrary to God's law. If God tells me to go do something and then man tells me don't do that, who do you think I'm going to listen to? And so that was Peter's point right there. And so you do your best to live peaceably among men. But when it comes to the point where, they draw a line in the sand and they say, you can't go beyond this line to go share the gospel, I say, we're going to let God decide on that one. So anyways, that was just, that was something on my mind. It's crazy. Yeah. The missionary is vilified. It's ridiculous. His reward is in heaven. And so all these people are looking at is the temporal side of things. They go, well, he could have brought disease. And yeah, that's a reality. He could have. I know that a lot of these tribes were, virtually wiped out because, people came to them from the outside and they brought in some sickness. But to die a temporal death is a bad thing, right? It's the consequences of sin. The wages of sin is death. Death is not a good thing. But what would be worse? What would be worse? To die a temporal death or to die eternal death, right? The second death, the lake of fire, to be separated from God for all of eternity. I mean, even Penn Jillette makes a great point on this with his video from a long time ago. I think it's called Gift of a Bible, where he sat there in front of the camera, and this guy's an atheist. Penn Jillette, you know who he is. He was on The Apprentice when Donald Trump was on that program. He's a very famous Las Vegas magician, illusionist, and he's a very outspoken atheist. And he put that video out there, Gift of a Bible, and the gist of it was this. Even though he's an atheist, he's saying, if you're a Christian and you're not out there like evangelizing, he says the word proselytize. He says, I've never respected people who don't proselytize. I don't respect that at all. How is it that you could believe in a place of everlasting life or everlasting torment and hold that back, not share that with somebody? And then he goes so far as to say, and the logic here is, it's right on. He says, how much do you have to hate somebody in order to believe that everlasting life is possible and yet not share that with them? And he gives a very practical example. He says, if I saw a truck that was coming at somebody on the road and I'm yelling at that person, hey, there's a truck coming at you, get out of the way, and you're not listening to me, there comes a certain point where he says, I will tackle you. And then he goes on back to the evangelizing thing. He says, and this is more important than that. And remember who that's coming from. It's coming from the mouth of somebody that doesn't even believe what we believe is true. But he's calling you out. He's saying, look, if you believe these things are true, how much do you have to hate somebody in order to believe it and yet not share that with them? And so, there you are being commissioned not only from Jesus, you're being commissioned from an atheist right there to get out there and speak the truth. And so you could definitely say, because that guy, John Allen, did not hate these people, because he loved these people, he went out there and he tried to share the truth with them. I'm just checking on this flight again, guys. Trying to catch up on these bits here too. Absolutely obey the Creator rather than men. 1,000%. It's been years. My 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 dad 465. Put a work into that one day. Like this is like maybe like my third workout. Like after like not doing it for years and years, and probably never doing more than like 5. I used to just rep out like 225 in those like CrossFit style workouts. But I decided one day just keep putting it on and like let's see what I could do. And I hit 465, and so that's one power lift right there. Back squat, I can't remember. It's up there like higher fours. Bench, I never was a really big time bencher. A 25 apart from 2 plates, so 275.
All I've done is watch videos so far.
My push-up numbers for buds. I forget what I tested in at. I know that I was really close to that 100 range. They're kind of messing with us during the test day, so it's hard to really hit what you truly can hit. I remember they're really people out for push-ups, even when they're good push-ups, like getting hit on that. But when I was in the teams, when I was on team 1, I did over 140 in one little 2-minute round. So over 140, and I worked on that. I never really worked on the sit-ups, so I always got close to 100 on those. But those are my numbers there, and then it was like a sub 9 on the run, sub 9 on the swim. And then the pull-ups, I remember that the test day for pull-ups, even though I was able to easily knock out like over 20 dead hang pull-ups, on the test day, this is really slow down. So instead of just banging out pull-ups, going up, down, the instructor will call it up. So everyone's got to get their chin above the bar. You can't go down until he says down. So say up, down. That's 1. Up, down. That's 2. So you can imagine how tough that is. I forget what the minimum is that you need. I think the minimum is like 7 or 10 or something like that. But I remember by the time we finally hit that minimum, then you could go as fast as you wanted to go. But man, he burned us out. And so I think I only got like 15 on the actual test day, just because he burned us out so bad going through those. And there's guys that didn't pass because of how slow we were going. There's guys that couldn't even do the minimum that day. They probably could do the minimum on any other day if they're doing it at their own pace. Dead hang pull-ups, not kipping, they could do it. But because of the way that we did it that day, there was guys that fell off the bar and they weren't passing, which is crazy. Not a bunch of them, just a couple of guys. I just remember being really shocked by that. Like that would be a bad way to go. Still keeping an eye on that flight. Okay, so for the 140 push-ups, I couldn't have been any more than like 165 pounds. And I know I was putting on weight by then because I was on SEAL Team 1, and I was starting to do a lot more like lifting back then. And I was putting on the weight. And here's the thing is that I went from being like a top 3 runner, and I was a top 3 runner when I showed up to the team. And by the time we were doing that test, because you do these PSTs like frequently throughout your career in the Navy, with just an extra like 20 pounds on me in comparison to Bud's, all of a sudden I went from being like one of the guys in the very front on the runs to now as we run as a team, like now I'm like one of the guys that's like middle of the pack. It was so strange. And so I really realized there, it's like you can become muscle bound, just putting on that little bit of extra weight. It really made a difference. Like when you're into body weight exercises and you're doing things like calisthenics and running and swimming, it's important that you don't put on unnecessary muscle, like unnecessary, weight. It really is unnecessary. It'll bound you later on. I remember seeing that in Buds. I remember I'd be on a log and I'd have a guy show up in the boat crew, like next to me on this log that I don't know, like this is just the very beginning, but I'm looking over him. I just see this guy's like a meathead, like just gigantic biceps. And in my mind, I'm thinking, great, cause we're chest carrying this log. So it's like in this constant like curl position. I'm thinking it's great to have giant biceps right next to me here, like we got some good guys on this log. Well, yeah, that guy definitely was probably stronger than me in terms of just like power that he could output in a short amount of time. But within minutes, this guy was done. And I remember just being shocked by that, like seeing like this guy is completely done. He is not only not helping out anymore, the guy was now like leaning over the top of the log. We're like carrying him around. And I'd heard about being muscle bound before. I mean, Scott told me about it. Got to remember that, things weren't so popular on the internet back then. Like information was not so accessible. And so that was just like the first time I seen it with my own eyes. So this is the rest of the line for my flight. It's dwindling. So I got to be getting on here pretty soon. I didn't bother boarding with the first group because I don't need to get any overhead space. So I'm not worried about that. It's got my backpack, but I got to cut the feed. So guys, this is cool. Love doing this chat. Sorry if I didn't get to your comments as they're flying by. I get pretty focused sometimes. So we'll definitely do this again. All right. This isn't the last to see of me. I intend to be back on here doing more. I want to start doing stuff like this and talk about physical fitness, spiritual fitness, mental fitness, like that mental toughness. Like I think that's a trifecta right there. Those are three good things right there. Physical toughness, mental toughness, and spiritual discipline, or you could say spiritual toughness. So God bless you guys. Take care. Have a good one.